Hello, and welcome to the Transforming Loneliness interview series. I'm Laura Parker, the creator and host of the series. Transforming Loneliness approaches loneliness with fresh and unexpected ways of seeing and responding that cultivate connection, belonging, and love. Today, I'm thrilled to be here with Ber-Henda Williams. Ber-Henda Williams is a bilingual poet, speaker, who runs the intersections of race, gender, and culture. She is an empathic visionary coach supporting a revolution through love. What I love about Ber-Henda is her passion and realness. She has a powerful presence, and yet she lets us into her tender heart. Hello, Ber-Henda, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's wonderful to be here with you.
Yes, likewise.
Thanks. So when you first heard about this topic, Ber-Henda, you shared with me that you were very excited about the topic of loneliness. Can you share what is it about this topic that you love?
I am such a fan of human connection and unraveling all of the nuances and pieces that lead to connection, but also keeps us from connecting. And so, what are those layers? What are the variables that keep us separated? Whether it be shunning or self-imposed separation, what is it that makes us so wonderfully and uniquely human? And what I have found is humans very much need community. And even those of us who consider themselves solitary, like I do consider myself a solitary person, I'm finding in my work as both poet and coach that there are moments that I for sure need to come out of isolation and rejoin sort of the larger community.
Yeah, I hear you. Finding that balance between solitary and then coming out of our isolation is such a tricky thing. And sometimes when we hit those moments when we want to come out, it can be not so smooth because we might want to come out, but do we find the village of waiting arms there for us when we're ready to come out, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's really important, to your point, where there'll be a village of waiting arms for us. And I think that's why it's really important, especially as we mature, to find your people. You know, there's a tribe for you in your disposition who are sensitive enough and understanding and compassionate toward your needs, because I think that there's a similarity, and that similarity breeds a certain camaraderie.
Right. And it sounds like you're saying that finding your people is a pretty nuanced thing,
It
you
is.
know, and it requires knowing yourself really well and being
Mm-hmm.
able to accept yourself. Because a lot of us, you know, we might be trying to join a tribe based on certain reasons that aren't about who we really are. It might be more about
Yeah.
status, or we want to hang with the popular kids, or you know,
Yeah, totally.
and it may have that group may bear no resemblance with who we really are.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think that's the learning curve and the journey, is that, there's what you as the individual values, and then what you think you need to value. And that's the beauty, I think, of being patient with yourself and discovery, that you really do get to find out, like, who you are. And I love Gary Zukav, the author of Seed of the Soul, and he talks about you, little you, in terms of like a facet of your personality, and then you, the uppercase um Y in you, that's the soul. And I
Mm.
think that for many of us, we're conditioned to um not hide, retreat, turn inward. We're looking for ourselves in sort of this very external sort of way versus
Mm,
doing retreat and spending time alone to really figure out who it is that we are.
mm. Yeah, and so that brings us into a more personal realm here. What is your experience of loneliness?
So I would say my experience with loneliness, I didn't realize it at the time, but I think that being an empath naturally creates a sense of loneliness. You don't fit in anywhere. The things that you most think about or that you value um, aren't shared values with the larger community or a larger world, wherever you are. So it makes you feel a little different, for lack of a better term, weird or strange, because you have a certain proclivity toward things that are different, things that are more spiritual, things that maybe even your musical taste, the way you feel, you feel more deeply than the average person. And it creates a certain anxiety. And being this way can lead to a sense of loneliness because no one understands you. And sometimes the more you speak, the harder it is to be understood.
I see. Could you share an example with us, with our audience and me? Like, is there one memory you have about a time when, there was something that you were interested in or you were trying to share that you just felt like you just couldn't find anyone in common around that? Like you mentioned that you tend to feel more,
Mhm.
and it seems like maybe you're referring to the feeling realm or the intuitive realm. I'm just curious to hear more about that.
Sure. Yeah, so I could even remember, as a child, not being picked for athletic experiences, or like, being the last pick to play on a team, um, not really invited into quote unquote clubs or like social uh, interactions. I can
Mm.
remember really being drawn into the world of like mythology, definitely like Greek myths and legends and lore. I found deeply fascinating.
Mm.
So I spent, I think, more time by myself in these imaginary worlds, and I
Mm.
felt more at home there than I did in my perspective, my respective community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it sounds like that realm of the imaginary world was really supportive and nourishing for you.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I had a hyper imagination, as far as I was concerned, in any body of water. Um, there was a lady of the lake or mermaids or sea creatures that inhabited uh, the water environment. The moon was a living being to me and had a princess or inhabitants
Mm.
there as well. So I was just always really intrigued by nature too. And I always felt that forests had enchantment
Yeah.
around it. So having conversations with people, around those kinds of topics don't necessarily make you very make you very popular.
Yeah. And so what have you learned from that? Like, have you found a way to find people who share that interest, or have you navigated it in other ways?
Yeah. So I mean, as an artist and participant in the arts, the artist does live in this world of pure imagination, and they do see things in sort of this abstract sort of way, and have a heightened sense of uh, fantasy maybe than the average person. They see things from a different perspective. So in working or being collaborative with other artists or those who fancy the arts, their childhood, their musical taste, their interests run we run a similar parallel.
Mm. So I can imagine that that ends up being like bringing wind under your wings, you know,
Yes.
like providing some lift for what you're up to, having found people where you can riff off of each other, you know,
Hmm.
other artists.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that again, finding the community of similar value definitely helps.
For sure. And how did you find that?
I believe that I found it through being more expressive, more honoring of like my own beliefs and not shaming myself or hiding myself. And
Mm.
so the more expressed that I became, the more my people started to show up and connections made.
Isn't that interesting? I've heard it said that, you know, to sing your song, otherwise your people can't find you,
That's right.
you know? And so I'm so curious, how did you find your way into being more expressive, like taking that risk and not being stopped by shame?
So there's across the country, and I would even say many parts of the world, there's open mic. So open mic poetry or open mic musicians or jam sessions really allowed me to be my creative self. And in expressing that creativity, I found that it created a sense of community and allowed me sort of permission to be vulnerable and to be more authentic. And so as I would hear other poets or other artists and other creatives, um, kinships began to develop and friendships also began to develop as well. So I think that having the bravery of showing up to an open mic event, even if you're afraid, um, allows you to resonate with people on a more intimate level.
Yes, and in that you had to have the ability to honor your own creative impulse. You had to be saying yes to this part of yourself that is an artist. And then I could imagine you might have just gone to an open mic without performing, like go just show up and maybe witness the others. I mean, I'm curious how that happened. What was your first experience of going to an open mic?
Nerve wracking
Yeah.
because I wasn't sure how my work would be perceived or how, um, what other people would think of the work. It connects, it lands because the connections that you're making are divine ones. Like the work that you're sharing is not just you alone, it's other people who are experiencing this. And so the gift of the share is not just for you. The
Wow.
gift is, yeah, the gift is that it's going to impact and I would use the word bless someone else.
Oh, I see. So in that moment of getting up on the stage and performing, you really are. It sounds it's like it's so important to keep, to be, or maybe you are reminded in that moment that this isn't for you. That
Yeah.
there's a connection that happens. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a glimmer of our divinity that shows up when we are transparent and vulnerable in a performance space. And I think that that's why, we have so many celebrated artists, like, for example, Stevie Wonder or Bob Marley, Simon and Garfunkel, Sting. I mean, these artists, the Bonnie Raitt song, I Can't Make You Love Me. I mean, that song has been covered. How many times has that song been covered? from artists from
Yeah.
all different genres. And I think that there's a resonance in that song because people can identify with rejection
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the need.
Yeah. Even as you're saying that, I'm having goosebumps, you
Hmm.
know, I'm thinking of those words, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I hear you. So, what would you like to share with our audience about the difference between solitude and being lonely?
Wow. So I think that solitude is something that we choose. Solitude and being alone is something that we require, and it's something that is highly um, sought after. And in that seeking, I trust that we find our deeply rooted, intimate connection to the divine. And then being alone, or I would even say being lonely, is when we feel a profound absence of connection.
Mm.
That we could be in a room with people and still feel alone and still feel invisible. I can remember incidences of being, because I always feel like I live my life in the third person. So I can remember younger working in a retail space, and I would go for lunch or a break, and I would realize that in the mall setting, even though there were so many people around me, I was very alone.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a space that's really about connecting. And it seems like so important to connect with our animal selves, for lack of a better
Mm-hmm.
word. That's how I, you know,
Yeah.
we have a body and we have a heart, and that heart is
Yeah.
beating in our chest, and kind of just starting there. And the mall environment really separates us from that sense of ourselves as animals.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. There were no real connections being made. And I would remember, being on a team. And even though I was on a team, I didn't feel very connected to people in the way to, even have lunch or, have a conversation. And I remember this palpable, like, pain. Like, well, why is it I can't connect with other people or no one invites me to? So I
Mm.
believe that I started to, uh, for lack of a better word, insulate myself
Mhm.
because, well, I'm just going to be alone. I'm this weird, strange person
Mm.
and I don't fit in anywhere. I don't belong anywhere. So I took it that it would be a lot for me. Yeah, a lot in life.
Uh-huh. And it sounds like you've met that lot. You know, you didn't say no to it. You, in that moment, you actually embraced it, but in a way that feels empowering, not
Yeah.
like you're, you know, like there's been some downside perhaps, but it sounds like for the most part it feels like an honoring
Hmm.
of this path, this unique path that you're on, you know?
Yeah, because there are seasons. I look at time and not sort of a chronological kind of way or a linear kind of way. I look at time in a seasonality. And so there are seasons where it's time to be alone, and then there's seasons where it's time to join the group or join the pair. I
Yeah.
believe in seasons for coupling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those seasons aren't always decided by us. You know, our
Mm-mm.
ego mind isn't in control of those seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I know you have a poem to offer
I
our
do.
audience, so I just wonder if you're ready to share that with us now.
Yeah. So this poem that I have, for your listening audience is around the the emotional side of being human. And I wrote it because I was actually in the middle of a business meeting, planning session, and I started crying. And I couldn't stop. And I couldn't understand why I was so emotional. And in some of the work that I've been doing lately, I have been doing mourning rituals around things that are not necessarily death. So the end of a relationship, or the end of a job, or the end of a personal cycle, giving myself permission to mourn. And so that is a very, or can be a very lonely space, and can be a very solitary space. So, so I hope that your audience enjoys the poem. It's called Evening Vespers.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's only Tuesday, and I am a human being doing human things. Crying, no bra, no makeup, no shame. It's only Tuesday. I am a human being doing human things. Loving, desiring, longing. It is only Tuesday, and I am a human being doing human things. Wishing, hoping, dreaming for L-O-V-E. It is only Tuesday. I am a human being doing human things, breathing, being, Ber-Hendering. My name is Ber-Henda, and I am a human being.
Thank you, Ber-Henda. I see you. You are beautiful.
Thank you, and so are you.
Thank you. Thank you for. Thank you for your courage.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to come in with words after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's okay to sit with silence. I think that's the other thing to mention, is that sometimes in the loneliness or the lonely feeling, just bearing witness is enough.
Yeah. And when you say just bearing witness, it's like, it sounds like it should be so easy, you know, but that bearing witness is an art form.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess we're winding up to coming towards the end here.
Yeah.
And, I just wanted to ask if you want to let our audience know about what you're up to in the world, and any other things last things you might want to share on this topic, or anything.
Yeah. So, I'd love for your listeners and witnesses to reach out to me if they want to connect more with me and my work. I have a website, which is Ber-Henda, BER-HENDA Williams.com is one way to reach out to me. I also host a radio show around culture, community, and connection. And that airs every first and third Sunday. And I have amazing guests, and I'm looking forward to you being a guest on our show. Very much so. Yeah. And my passion project is The Power of Girlhood, which is a leadership institute for girls between the ages of 13 and 18. And one of the things that we strive for and are looking to build up in our girls, their ability to speak their truth, to speak up, to be heard, to take initiative in their communities and be leaders. And whether that's to initiate projects or events, or rather just being strong and resolved in their personal and life choices. That to me is a sign, a huge mark of a leader. So that information can also be found on my website if you click on the tab, The Power of Girlhood.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for doing that great work in the world and for
Thank you.
joining me today for this interview. It's been such a pleasure sharing this time with you.
Likewise. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to connecting soon.
Me too. Okay.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye.